everybody, my name is Souls Convoy. Today I'm taking a look at BingoToys BT08-01 Hertz. This is their take on Strafe, one of the Technobots, and is the first member of their Computron set. This is on loan to me from Gat from my Discord. It also goes by RZ500 on TFW 2005. Thank you again for letting me take a look at this figure. I believe you can pick it up on Shozy Store. I'll put a link to the description. And with that, let's get started. I'm not bringing the box down because it's kind of obscene and won't fit in my filming space, but it is just a very generic box with pictures of the figure and some stylized art on the borders. Getting in on the figure itself, this is a very charming, very pretty figure. It's painted very well. It's the first thing you're going to notice is this beautiful glossy-ish paint that's basically covering the entire surface of the toy. So it strikes very premium. It's a very high shelf presence figure. I mean, automatically, you know, just not really getting into the head sculpt per se, but why don't we just do it anyways, right? Like, you're automatically going to notice that really nice chrome visor. I've leveled up to using a spudger to point. I don't know how I use my fingers, but whatever. There's some silver right there. I mean, the face sculpt is done not bad. I wouldn't say that it's like dorky. I mean, it's not perfect, but I think the shaping of the lips and the nose are pretty solid. There is some like stylized greebling and line work here. It definitely has like a little bit of the pseudo Gundam aesthetic going on. I mean, there's tampographs here as well that are actually asymmetrical, which is interesting. I just noticed that. Tampographs on the shoulders, silver paint, specks of paint all throughout. The paint is done very well in this figure. It seems to be durable, but we'll talk about that more. Just like moving down the figure as a whole. Let me just zoom out a little bit. It is also proportioned very well, so I'm going to lift it up so you can kind of see. Getting the whole thing in frame might not be possible for my setup, but it does present very well. There's also some detail work here on the knees that's done really well with some red paint, gold paint, silver paint, red paint. I am casting a shadow. Let me try and get on the legs. So there's a lot of detail work here. There's also some gold detailing on the feet and some more tampographs on the edge of the foot. From the back, aside from the wings, which are tucked into the back of the legs, and the cockpit kibble on his back, it is pretty clean. There's even paint details exclusive here, like some gold paint here, red paint there. It does all present very well. This is a very handsome toy, and it feels very premium. The materials feel great. There is some die cast. It doesn't have a die cast skeleton or anything, but there definitely is some die cast metal on this toy. These elbow joints are definitely die cast. Why are you not centered? There we go. And there are some other die casts, I think, in the knees as well. When I do the articulation, which we're going to do in a second, you'll be able to see that. So presentation is fantastic. Very, very, very premium for sure. Articulation is pretty good. The head is on some type of a ball joint assembly that allows it to get up that high. There's a hinge in here. So there's a hinge right here. And then there's a ball joint right there. You can see that. But it does allow you to get really solid. You can get side to side. You can get up a decent amount, and then you can get down a decent amount. If you want more down, you can actually untab the assembly the head is on and let it sit there, and that can give you as much down as you want depending on your needs. So the head articulation is very sufficient, and again, love the chrome. Looks fantastic. The shoulders have a bit of a double butterfly assembly. They basically hinge out from the rear and then hinge forwards. So you can get like whatever you want using these butterfly shoulders. Just keep in mind it does look ugly after a while. Aesthetically speaking, you have to be careful with how much you use them, because otherwise they're just going to really compromise the look. But they're really good for like a really subtle backwards butterfly or like a really subtle forwards butterfly. That's where they're ideal. This joint right here in the very back, Like this one's on a screw in the front and that one's pretty tight. I like it. But then this one in the back is a little bit more free moving than I'd like for something like this. I think butterflies should always be really tight because they're not primary joints. So that, I guess you could probably easily tighten that up. I have to see the other side maybe as a screw, but I think it's just a pin. The main shoulder obviously is a universal, and that's just going to get you everything you need. This part right here will hinge up. You easily get 90 degrees out. You don't get more though. You also have a bicep swivel. There are these panels here, but as far as I know, there's actually clearance to get the full 360 without moving these panels out of the way. But they are freely pinned and they just move out of the way, so you don't need to move them beforehand. The elbow has some nice tech going on, so it is going to get you 180, and as you can see, there's a linkage right here. We'll try not to obscure it too much, but basically as you close the elbow back up, you can kind of see that, right? Like this elbow is up here is looser, so that'll go first, and then the second elbow will trigger this linkage as it goes forward. Pretty sick. Definitely going for that. This whole thing is going for a very metal build meets Transformers vibe, which I know a lot of people may or may not like, but I think it executes it pretty well. Also some red paint on the forearm I didn't talk about. Really nice detail work. The hands are actually on a ball joint at the base that I think is internal, so I can't see it. I think it like peeks through sometimes, but this gray base the hands are on is on a ball joint. There's a swivel on the outside. And then for the fingers, we're going to be looking at basically general fare for fingers. You know, you have a ball joint base thumb. Wow, the lighting is not. There we go. So you have a ball joint base at the thumb, and there's a hinge. The thumb hinge is very tight. I'm not really worried about snapping it or breaking it. It's just annoying to handle. The hand ball joint is also pretty loose. It's looser than all the fingers. So the fingers can kind of just be a pain to pose because of that. Each finger has a base knuckle, a second knuckle, and that's going to call it, you know, so just the base knuckle and one knuckle in the middle, and there's no splay, which is completely fine for a figure this size, I think. But, you know, otherwise you have to get like those larger, slightly misproportioned hands. And that's not really necessary, I think. Moving on, we also do have, and these will move automatically, so you don't really need to pose them beforehand. You always might want to, just like watch out for possible paint scraping, but I think it'll be fine. You also do have a fully unrestricted ratcheted waist swivel, which is gorgeous, sounds fantastic. That is probably the combiner bicep. You can move these hip skirts up and out of the way. I don't like these hip skirts that much. The front ones are in a ball joint, so if you don't like tilt them forwards as you move them up sometimes, they can get caught on the sides of the side ones. This edge of the side ones right here can sometimes get caught behind this part of the thigh. And again, when everything is fully painted, you want to be careful. I don't see any damage or chipping or scraping, but just something to keep in mind, you know. There's no ab crunch above the waist. There is a like pelvic crunch, and like it's hard to see without moving the legs first, but I'm gonna try to like demonstrate. So like this is the resting position, and then I believe you get like as that much. So it's actually pretty significant, but since it's below the since it is below the waist, it's a little bit less useful than a conventional ab crunch would be, because even when you combine it with the hips, which are actually, by the way, I have to move them out, very tight ratchet going out. The hips are offset, like not drop downs technically, but they're drop down. The main joint is offset from the outside joint. There is no joint right here. The only joint the hips move up and down on is right there. Right? This is not a forward and backwards hip joint. This is only for moving outwards. So it is a pseudo drop down. I think Rise of the Beast Voyager class Optimus Primal has hips like this, and Magic Square uses hips like this. And if you combine the ab crunch and the drop down, you get like this much up at absolute maximum due to the design of the hip skirts, which is pretty respectable, but also like not really much more than your general basic ab crunch. Actually, I think less than a basic ab crunch with 90-degree hips. it's just not as dynamic because it's a pelvic crunch and not an ab crunch. But I think it is substantial, and there was no space for the ab crunch because the combiner elbow is stuffed in here, as far as I know. That's basically how much you can get up, and because of the design of the hips, they can't really go back that far. When the ab crunch is engaged, you can go back this far, but when the ab crunch is not engaged, you actually have less range going back. You can only go back like this far. So it's not a lot. You can kick out, I believe, to very tight ratchet, 90 degrees almost before you start clashing. You have a thigh swivel that's pretty much unhindered, unless you're like parallel to the hip, where then you can't go inwards. There is a linkage gimmick in the knee. So the knee has a basic joint, it's a double jointed knee. There's a base joint right here, which you can use without using the top joint, and that's going to be fine and dandy. And I prefer using the lower joint because it eludes the thighs as it being longer. When you use the top joint, they can be a bit short. But if you do want to use the top joint is going to have a linkage with the front thigh plate, which looks awesome. So that rules. That definitely rules. Sweet to see. Again, very much going for that metal build meets Transformers vibe right here. Otherwise, the ankles finally have a really nice ankle tilt. You have a swivel. You have the entire foot can rock, which is awesome. All the way down, a little bit up, and then, but no worries, because now this can get in the way. You can move this up. You can move this up. You do get a really nice toe tilt upwards, right? So definitely very, very posable. One of the longest articulation segments I've ever done on this channel. I will say sometimes the ranges can be a little bit more limiting than the articulation would suggest, simply because of like the presence of the wings on the back of his calves and various other parts of the design, or just the way the toy works. But he is pretty posable. Oh, I have the Major Look thing going on with his finger. For accessories, we are going to have two pairs of these guns, which he can hold. There are tabs in his hands, which these are just going to peg into. There you go. It's very painless, by the way. I appreciate it. A lot of times Masterpiece style hands are a little bit annoying to get guns in, but depending on the peg system, but this is like one of the most painless examples I've ever encountered. You can always wrap the fingers around. I just don't want to right now. And you know, they do look fine. They look fine. You know, they do look fine. You can also store them on the side of his hips using this 5mm peg. It's pretty interesting to see 5mm peg storage on a Masterpiece style figure, especially one this premium. Usually you don't see it, but you can store them like that. You can also like turn them around and give them like hip cannons, which I did for one of my gallery shots because I like that. I thought that was funny. They don't combine or anything. They do transform, but I'll show that later in the alternate mode. His other accessories are just a pair of swords, and these are painted pretty well. My one issue is that they're not mirrored. They're the exact same sculpt. So like if you try to put them both on his waist, they're gonna be like pointing in different directions in terms of the angle of the blade. It's just a very strange oversight, and not mirroring these seems like such a bizarre cost-cutting measure for something that is so premium. And like they didn't spare any expense, so it's bizarre to me that like they just forgot. I think it was more of an oversight, like they just forgot. These could also tab together though, so maybe like that was like the ideal. Maybe I'm just like reading it wrong, and they actually wanted you to store, because usually when you store a sword on the side of a character, you do with like the blade facing down. Maybe they wanted, like this was the set they were going for, both of the swords pegged in together. So in that case, that's fine. I don't think it was the best move since they're very symmetrical otherwise, but you can peg them both into his hands. Even though he has ball jointed wrist action, they don't really get a lot of tilt downwards, unfortunately, but that's completely fine that you get like that much tilt down. The wrists are a little bit floppy though. But none of the accessories are heavy, so I guess it's not a big deal. They do look good. I mean, they're fine. They have some good greebling going on, and the paint isn't too bad. Kind of wish they were translucent, but whatever. You know, it's not the end of the world. That's pretty much it for accessories. He does have another accessory, but I don't usually go over combiner limbs and individual reviews for figures like these. Nearly knocked over my lighting setup, but I just wanted to show off the very fancy combiner hand. Looks really good. You know, I posed it up. It has a lot of joints: ball joint, hinge, splay, hinge. Feels very premium. It can also split in half, and I guess the idea is that like you can pretend this is like a gun. He can't really hold it, and I can't really find how to peg it into his alt mode. I think there's like a single 5mm port that becomes exposed, and you can peg these like under something and have them act as guns. But I don't really care for that, and they don't really do much in robot mode or have anywhere to peg in. But it is a very nice hand. Like if you even buy this as a standalone, this is just a fun thing to mess with. It's like a large, chunky, fun robot hand. Pretty cool. I'm going so slow. For size comparisons, this is going to be a little bit jank, but I will start off with a ruler. So he is approximately 9.5 inches tall, or I guess 9.25, maybe 9 and like 4/16 or whatever. Not 9 and 6/16 to the top of his head. I'm going to try to compare him to things that are somewhat in the same size. So for example, here's another Masterpiece Combiner limb, which is MMC's Brawl mold, but specifically the Ruination version. Here, and that one is notoriously large for an MMC Combiner limb. Here is a more typical MMC Combiner limb, which is their, this is their, I believe it's called Shift Lane. My God, I blanked on the name. It's their version of Rollbar. And here we have them all next to MMC's reformatted Tyrantron, which is their version of an IDW Stormbringer Megatron. And here we go. Right there. So he is huge. Like he's turned up the size of like usually a Masterpiece leader. Like you would expect a Masterpiece Optimus Prime to be like a little bit taller than this guy. So he's very large. Definitely much larger than the average MC Combiner limb. And I mean, here is like Deluxe Bone Shaker, who barely comes up to like his shin. You know, like I know his ankles are tilted, so he's not as, he can be even taller, but he is very, very big. That's it for this robot mode. I'm going to get him transformed into alternate mode, and we'll take a look at it there. Here we have Hertz in alternate mode, and honestly, I think this looks pretty good. Usually, Cybertronian space modes and Transformers are really hit or miss in terms of shaping and design, and this one isn't the most sleek thing in the world, I'll admit, but I do think that, you know, it carries the design over pretty well. The detail work is really nice. You can see these details that are picked out. Just the paint is done really well, and it does carry over super well into this mode. My main complaint is like the cockpit, I think, should have been tinted darker. Would have helped a lot. Like in person, I'm looking at my camera right now. My camera actually has it darker than it is in person, and it doesn't look that good. I think it should have been like a really dark translucent blue, or like even if it's a light blue, like a not very translucent light blue, if that makes sense. Because or not very transparent, because I don't think this works that well. And also the cockpit detailing inside is non-existent, so it looks kind of stupid. It's very hefty, very heavy. It's about 10 inches long and has a 10-inch wingspan. Like you can see, it's quite, you know, like let me fix the angle of my camera. It doesn't really fit in frame. It's very large. I have pretty big hands too, and it does kind of make them look small. So this is a really hefty guy, and it is heavy because the mass condenses and compresses despite the wingspan elongating, so he feels denser than the robot mode for sure. I think it looks good. It gives me like a Galaga vibe, you know, like those Flash game versions of Galaga, or Galaga, Jesus. But, you know, I think it looks pretty good compared to most Strafe Ultra modes. You can tab in his swords and the fingers under the wing. The problem with the swords is, I'm just going to show you the first one. Like, because the swords, I said before, these aren't mirrored. One of them is going to be facing this direction, and the other one on the other side is going to be facing this direction. So you see, like, they're going to be facing the same direction in terms of the blade tip, which means they're not going to be symmetrical. So that's really annoying. You can also split the hand in half, and there are pegs in here, and you can like you can peg it in, and that's supposed to be like underwing blasters. I think it looks really bad like that, and I'm just not going to do that. I think it looks terrible. You can do that on both sides, but again, I do think it looks horrid, and the middle part of the hand, which is the wrist swivel for the combined mode, ends up with nothing to do, so it's not even like all that perfect of a solution, in my opinion. But for the most part, I think it looks pretty good, and the weapon storage isn't a huge deal, just really the cockpit. It feels good, it handles well, and of course the landing gear, which you're going to be able to retract by going like that. And then these you just flip up. Very smooth, very simple. These are a bit weak. I've noticed sometimes they'll like bow inwards or bow out and the thing will fall. But they're not floppy, but it can happen. And then this one you can just pull down. This one's nice. This one's nice. You can pull down and then tilt in. There you go. So pretty nice jet mode, spaceship mode, whatever. I like it. Moving on to final thoughts, I will say this is definitely a figure where the biggest thing that's going to make you love it or hate it, and I don't think anyone's really going to hate this thing, it's just like, do you like the aesthetic it's going for? It is very much trying to be like metal build Transformers, and I do think that compared to like other companies that have tried that, like Kang Toys or Dreamstar Toys, especially compared to those two, it's definitely much more restrained and it feels a lot more faithful to the character. That being said, it still is going for that kind of look. If you don't like that kind of look, you might not like this. But I don't think that it does it poorly, if that makes any sense. The paint, the sculpting, the detail work, all of it is extremely well done objectively. There's no denying that whatsoever. The materials feel good. It definitely has a metal build vibe. The die cast is great. The articulation is almost perfect. The accessories like are pretty good. Outside of some extremely minor gripes, like, oh, the cockpit color or the swords not being mirrored, or like really minor stuff like that, there's not many issues. Like, objectively, this is a fantastic release. Whether or not you like it, that's going to be up to you. But I don't think it's like, oh, so like, you know, stylized to the point of no return, right? I think it looks pretty good for the most part. But I do see how someone could be like put off by this aesthetic in general, but it is really popular in China from what I know. And I do think this handles it with a much more restraint and much more poise than some other toys have gone with applying this aesthetic to Transformers. The biggest positive in this toy's playing field, or like the biggest win it has going for it, is that not only does it deliver an extremely well painted, high quality, sensational display piece, it's also only $115 for a masterpiece combiner limb of this caliber, scale, and size. Fans Toys is charging you like what, 160, 170, 180 if they can, sometimes 150. I think it's 160 on average, maybe 180. X-Transbots is now charging like 140. MMC is charging between 120 to 140 for something with a lot less paint. So like for the price to value, it kind of blows away the rest of the MP combiners. Now, whether or not you like it, again, up to you, but definitely a crazy value pickup. If you don't want a whole combiner team, but you like Strafe, I really find it difficult to say that you shouldn't buy this. Just straight up, just buy it. Like I can't. There are almost no things that are holding me back from saying like you should just get this regardless, because I think it's a really good standalone and I think it's a fantastic value. The biggest issue is just, do you like how it looks? You know, and if you don't like how it looks, then don't buy it. But if you like how it looks, I think it's a no-brainer. I don't think I can recommend anything that came out this year as vehemently, because like the only thing here is subjective. You will know automatically from a picture of the toy whether or not you will like it visually, and that is like the only real gripe I think people have with it, maybe, is if they don't like the aesthetic, and that's just like a subjective thing. And if you like the aesthetic, then like this is, again, not just a no-brainer, but I think you owe it to yourself to buy this. And I hate saying that for product. Like, I don't think like you have to ever consume product, but if you like Transformers that have this aesthetic, it's definitely one of the best releases ever in that market. Thank you again to Gat for letting me take a look at this. I had a lot of fun with it, even if it's not my jam. Sorry again if the filming was a bit, took a bit longer, or the lighting or the framing of the filming was a little bit below par for my usual content. Again, my setup isn't really built for MP, and it's not really my jam, but I really did have a lot of fun, and I love looking at MP stuff, so it's always a fun time. I put a link in the description again, not sponsored or anything, but just, I don't know. My last video didn't do so great, but I understand my hiatus damaged my algorithm. But thank you again to the people who are still watching, paying attention, commenting, or even like responding to me on my videos on Discord. I really appreciate it. Link to the Discord is also going to be in the bio, in the description. Jesus. But that's pretty much it from me, guys. The Souls Convoy. Peace out.